All right, and so now we're going to talk the three foods that create disease, the three foods that cause autoimmune disease. And I want to make an important distinction here. Chronic inflammation is the culprit, but I want to be very clear about what inflammation is, because inflammation is actually part of the healing process of the body. And when you have acute inflammation, short-lived inflammation that happens temporarily and goes away, that's part of the body's healing process. It's when it becomes chronic, it's ongoing, it never goes away, the body never gets out of that inflammatory stage. That's when disease occurs. That's chronic inflammation. And so, like I said, inflammation is part of the healing process. You bump your knee, it gets swollen. Eventually, the swelling goes down, right? The inflammation is there as part of the healing process to move the toxins away, and then the body can begin to lay down new tissue, right? But with chronic inflammation, the body keeps getting re-injured or re-exposed to toxins over and over and over again and stays in this chronic state of inflammation, this early stage of healing constantly, showing that the body's trying to do something, but it's overwhelmed by being continuously exposed to injury or continuously exposed to toxins. And that's what's creating disease. So we're going to go into the three foods that contribute to it the most, okay? And so the first one is the most important one because it opens the door to a lot of other things causing a problem, okay? And we'll get into why. So the first number one food that creates autoimmune disease is going to be GMO, genetically modified, specifically corn, wheat, and soy. Okay, these foods have been genetically modified to tolerate more pesticide being sprayed on them. Okay, and so genetic modification in itself, you could argue, is neither a good thing nor a bad thing. It just is, right? It depends why are you modifying the genes of the plant or the animal. And in this case, they're genetically modifying these to tolerate more pesticides, specifically a pesticide called Roundup, which is very toxic to humans. Now, if you sprayed the amount of pesticide you would normally on these crops without them being GMO, they would die. Okay, so you're spraying a lot of pesticide. Guess what? That pesticide kills bugs and it kills other pests like rodents and things like that, and it kills other plants and it kills weeds. Okay, now in high enough doses, do you think that that could be harmful to humans? Well, yes, it is, right? And let's talk about how this came about. So Roundup was developed by the Monsanto Corporation, who was later bought by Bayer because their name just got so much negative brand equity. Okay, and so Monsanto originally was also the creator of Agent Orange, which was a very toxic substance used in the Vietnam War to kill forests. Basically the idea that the enemy soldiers were hiding in the forest, and if we just destroyed all the forests, then they wouldn't have any place to hide and we'd win the war. Didn't work, backfired. A lot of Americans, and I'm sure Vietnamese people, got sick from this. Okay, it was a very toxic substance. It killed trees. It's gonna kill people too. And so Roundup, similar thing. Okay, Roundup was designed basically to kill pests, to kill bugs. Okay, but also to kill weeds. That you could spray it instead of pulling the weeds yourself. That was their big value add. But what happened was that it turns out this stuff is very toxic. And in the past 5 to 10 years, Monsanto's lost a lot of court cases over non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, people getting non-Hodgkin's lymphoma from their exposure to Roundup. Okay, and so with these GMO corn, wheat, and soy, they're basically getting super doses of Roundup. Now, a lot of the other things that Roundup causes are harder to prove in court. The data on the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is very clear, so that's why they lost a lot of those cases. The other thing that Roundup causes is leaky gut. And why I'm saying Roundup, because it's not so much the corn, the wheat, or the soy itself, but it's what's sprayed on it. Okay, so if you're getting organic corn, wheat, and soy, that's going to be better because it's not sprayed with Roundup. Okay, not an ideal food, but way better than one that's genetically modified to be sprayed with tons of pesticide. And so what you have to understand is that what the main problem relating to autoimmunity is that the Roundup causes something called intestinal permeability. You may have heard this by its colloquial name, leaky gut, meaning that your gut is leaky. And a lot of people think that that means, oh, things are leaking out of my gut. No, it actually means things are leaking into your gut. Okay. Your small intestine is the part of your body that absorbs food, okay? So you've got, think of it really simplified. If your digestive tract, you've got your stomach, you've got your small intestine, you've got your large intestine, right? And then your mouth in the beginning and your rectum at the end. Okay, so small intestine's right in the middle, in between the stomach and the large intestine. That's where the food gets absorbed. That's where nutrition gets absorbed. That once your stomach breaks it down and digests it, then your small intestine does the absorption. Well, the Roundup has been shown to create holes in the small intestine, create permeability there, that now it's not just absorbing the nutrients and the things that it wants, it's also absorbing things that it doesn't want, that normally it filters out and doesn't get absorbed in the body and passes through in the poop. That's now getting absorbed, okay? Some of this stuff is very toxic. Now you're understanding why autoimmunity is such a toxicity problem, because now that your gut's permeable, now all this more toxicity can get in from all these other sources, mainly other foods as well, causing disease, creating disease, right? And so the idea is get the GMO corn, wheat, and soy out of the diet so that the intestine is no longer being damaged and getting holes punched in it, and that way the intestine can repair and no longer absorb all of this toxicity, okay? Which is very important, because the body has the ability to detoxify itself, but only to the degree that you don't expose it to toxins. And if you've got a leaky gut, well, you're just constantly getting exposed to toxins. Okay? You're constantly absorbing parts of food that normally you wouldn't absorb and wouldn't be toxic to you. They'd pass right through you. But with intestinal permeability, with leaky gut, well, now that Pandora's box is open, and the only way to close it is to stay off of these things indefinitely. Okay, so in addition to Roundup, there's also something specifically in corn called Bt toxin. Okay, this is a naturally occurring compound that happens in corn. But when Monsanto genetically modified it, they were able to genetically modify the corn to produce more Bt toxin, much more Bt toxin. Now, how this Bt toxin works is normally when bugs eat the corn, the Bt toxin causes their stomach to explode. Well, now you're doing it at mass scale with humans, and they're consuming it, right, but way more Bt toxin. Do you think it could be affecting their gut as well? The answer, yes. Right? And here's the thing, is GMOs were never tested in human trials. We never tested human safety studies, and then the animal studies we did were very short-lived, right? And so GMOs were introduced in the food supply almost 30 years ago in 1996. Maybe by the time you watch this video, it's been 30 years. And there were no tests. It was just not even announced to the public. It was just introduced to the food supply. And then in the coming years, by the early 2000s, we saw this, and it continues to grow, this explosion of autoimmunity and other chronic disease problems, right? And for a long time, we didn't know why, but over time, we put the pieces together and realized that, wow, this is a big problem. This is causing this intestinal permeability, this leaky gut, and all this other stuff is getting into the body, and that's why people are so toxic, right? And so, like I said, the best thing to do is just going to be to eliminate these. Like, worst case scenario is if you do consume corn, wheat, and soy, you're only consuming the organic kind, which has not been sprayed with any pesticide. Okay, so you can see how this sets the stage for this autoimmune cascade that happens. Now, one thing to consider, the other two food groups that I'm going to talk about also have this, because most processed food is created from genetically modified corn, wheat, and soy, and all animals, commercially grown animals, are fed corn, wheat, and soy, right? So second food that's a problem is going to be animal foods. Meat, fish, dairy, eggs, okay, are all going to be problematic. Now let's get with the most obvious one first, which is going to be dairy, right? Dairy is not food for human, right? If you're a human baby, you want to be drinking your mother's milk up until infancy and you're weaned off. Well, if you're a baby cow, you want to be drinking your mother's milk up until infancy and then you're weaned off. Okay, milk was meant for babies, specifically of the species that the baby is, right? You don't see in nature cats drinking dog milk or dogs drinking cat milk. That's absurd, right? But as humans, at some point in our history, we thought, wow, okay, this cow animal is very docile, and we can hem it in, and we can raise it for food, and we can kill it later. And also, while we're at it, we might as well drink its milk too, right? When food was scarce, this was a way to get more of it, right? But it's got all kinds of problems. Okay, we all know about lactose, right? That's one that many people have an allergy to because human milk doesn't have that much lactose in it, right? And you have more lactase to break it down when you are a baby. Okay, so many people can't break down that protein in the first place. Shows you, sorry, not protein. Lactose is a sugar. It's a complex carbohydrate. Many people can't break down that polysaccharide in the first place, showing you it's probably not a food that humans should eat. And so with the milk, it's interesting. They keep finding, okay, well, we'll make lactose-free milk, right? But then people have issues with the A2 protein, so they make lactose-free milk with the A2 protein taken out, right? And it's supposedly nature's perfect food, but they keep having to remove ingredients of it, right? For people to actually be able to not have reactions to it, which should be a clue that it's not health food. Like a real health food shouldn't have any downsides to it. Shouldn't have, well, these things about it are healthy, but it's also got this other thing, but the healthy aspects of it cancel out the end. No, a food is either completely healthy or it's, even if it's got one or two bad things in it, it's not fit for human consumption. Okay, because real food shouldn't have anything causing harm in it. Okay, and we'll get more into that when we get into the 3 foods that create health, that create healing of autoimmune disease in the next segment. Okay, but yeah, dairy is a big problem. Okay, it's also got a protein called casein in it. Okay, casein is a very globular, sticky protein, and it's implicated in cancer. In fact, there's a professor by the name of T. Colin Campbell who he's like in his 90s now. He's still teaching, still doing research. Very healthy guy because he followed the data that his research showed him. And he grew up on a dairy farm and wanted to prove that dairy, cow's milk, was the perfect food for humans. But when he actually did the study, the data came back very clearly that no, it was actually very bad for you. And the more of it you drank, the more health problems you had. One test he did specifically on rats was he looked at casein consumption in rats, casein, the protein found in milk and cheese, and he found that he did a study where he put half the rats on a 5% casein diet and half the rats on a 20% casein diet, and within months, all the 20% rats got cancer. Okay, 5% rats were fine. He took the 20% rats and took half of them and ratcheted them back down to 5%, and after a little while, the cancer went away, and the ones that stayed on the 20%, the cancer progressed, and some of them even died. Now, he took so basically the cancer went away after he put it back on 5%. Well, he took some of those and put it back on 20%, and of those, the cancer came back. And so what he found was that he could actually turn cancer on and off by how much casein was in the diet. Okay, so this is a very carcinogenic substance. Okay, allergies are a big thing. A lot of people have dairy allergies. A lot of people have allergies in general. We see that when we take kids with autism spectrum disorder and they remove dairy from their diet, their symptoms improve. Okay, people that have seasonal allergies, that have animal allergies. I, for instance, had a cat allergy up until I stopped consuming dairy. My dad had a cat allergy, just thought it was genetic. And then once I stopped consuming dairy, my cat allergy went away. Well, why is this? The dairy messes with the immune system, and that's why it's so troubling for people with autoimmunity, is that the body sees the dairy as like a foreign protein, foreign substance, and goes and attacks it, right? And so people with other allergies can get off dairy, and those allergies go away because the body became hypervigilant to all these offenders that once it got off the dairy, it didn't recognize other things as offenders either. Okay, pus. There's a lot of pus in milk. The government sets a limit, okay, how much pus can be in milk, and it's not 0, all right? And chocolate milk is the stuff that has the most pus in it because if they turn it brown, you don't see it, you don't notice it. Hormones, okay, hormones are a big problem with the milk. That basically the mother is giving growth hormone to the baby through the milk, right? And then if the cow's been given recombinant, so they give there's something called recombinant bovine growth hormone, which is given to cows to make them grow faster, to make them produce more milk. Okay, so that's even more growth factor, growth hormone, that's getting through to you if you're drinking the milk. And that growth hormone is causing cancer. Okay, what is unchecked cell growth? It's cancer. Okay, too much too much growth hormone can lead to cancer, and that's what you're getting, right? Not to mention estrogens, right? You're getting all this estrogen. So if you're a man, you don't want to be consuming all this excess estrogen. If you're a woman, you don't want to be consuming excess estrogen because that can lead to cancer. But a lot of female cancers are actually an excess estrogen condition, which is why women, birth control pills contribute to cancer. And if you don't believe me, look that up on the World Health Organization website. It is a class 1 carcinogen, meaning oral birth control pills are a known cause of cancer. And yes, I got a board complaint because I said that in a TikTok video, and I rebutted it, and the complaint was dismissed. Okay. So estrogen, hormones, not good for you. Okay. Now the dairy industry has a lot of money, has a lot of lobbying power with the USDA, just in the way that big pharma has a lot of lobbying power with the CDC and the FDA and these medical organizations. Well, the animal ag industry, most notably dairy, has a lot of influence over the U.S. government and USDA, and that's why you're seeing all these dairy ads for milk mustache, right? It does a body good, right, with no specific data. But like I said, T. Colin Campbell studied this and found that with the more dairy one consumed, the worse their health outcomes were. And so one of the things they like to talk about is, well, it's got calcium, which is good for your bones, right? You want to drink milk for strong bones. When in fact, the data shows that the people that consume the most dairy products, the most milk, actually have the highest rates of osteoporosis. Why is that? If the milk's got calcium, shouldn't it be helping your bones? Well, here's the thing, is that the milk has a lot of other things in it that don't help your bones, right? And so there's this idea of like, okay, well, it may have the casein, which is bad for you. It may have the lactose, which is bad for you, and the pus, and the hormones, and the recombinant bovine growth hormone, and the A2 protein, and all this stuff, right? But it's got calcium. But it's got protein. It doesn't undo the damage it's caused. This is what I call the big fallacy in nutrition. Okay, BIG, the but it's got. Okay, if you have to say but it's got protein, but it's got calcium, your food's a loser. I'm sorry. The healthiest foods have no downsides. You shouldn't have to apologize and say, well, I know it's got all this unhealthy stuff, but it's also got this. No, the healthiest foods, as we'll get into them, there's no need to say but on any of it. Okay? And so what happens with the bones and the calcium is that the other compounds in the milk have a net acidic effect on the body, right? That it would lower the body and the blood's pH level to levels that would kill you. You go into what's called acidosis. But luckily, the body has a protective mechanism. It has a way to combat that and keep the blood pH even, okay? And that is through the bones. The body will actually take calcium out of its own bones to offset the acidity to keep the pH and keep everything on the level, right? And it will deplete its own bones as much as it can, leading to osteopenia, osteoporosis. And so that's what happens, right? As the body breaks down its own bones to offset the acidity that's in the dairy and also the meat and also a lot of other acidic foods, right? And we're going to get into alkaline-forming foods because those are what create health in the body. We'll get into that in the next class, okay? So is there anything else? One other thing, casomorphins. I wanted to talk about that. So when the body consumes dairy, it actually breaks some of the, I can't remember if the proteins, the sugars, down into substances called casomorphins, okay, which are substances that are bind to opiate receptors in the body, creating an opiate-like effect, a high, like a euphoria, okay? This is why cheese is so addictive. This is why babies crave their mother's milk, right? It's by design to make you crave it, okay? And so this is why cheese can be so addictive and such a hard thing to break. It's of all these foods I'm showing here, it's probably the hardest one to quit, okay? And that is just the processed food and the dairy industry loves that. They love that their product's addictive and that you want to buy more of it and you can't stop doing it, okay? So next up, of course, is meat. People don't like hearing this one, right? But meat is very acid forming to the body. The body has to do all these things to offset it. And one of the things it has is what's called omega-6 fatty acids, okay? Omega. These are pro-inflammatory. They're found in meat and dairy, okay? And other things. We'll get into it. Seed oil, stuff like that, which we'll get to very soon, right? Pro-inflammatory. That they have something called linoleic acid, La, and the body processes that through an omega-6 pathway to something called arachidonic acid, AA. Arachidonic acid is super pro-inflammatory, leads to chronic pain, leads to inflammatory bowel disease, heart attacks, strokes. It's implicated in a whole bunch of inflammatory processes in the body, right? This chronic inflammation, you've got too much arachidonic acid, right? And so we'll get more into this because the omega-6 pathway runs alongside the omega-3 pathway, which is anti-inflammatory. And so what you really want to do is be decreasing your omega-6 intake and increasing your omega-3s, which we'll get into that in the next class of how to increase your omega-3s with the right foods, okay? And I will say a lot of people think, oh, fish is really high in omega-3s, okay? That's true, but we've got another big fallacy. We've got another but it's got, right? But it's also got mercury, birth control pills, all dioxins, PCBs, all these things that are the oceans are the most polluted part of Earth, right? And the fish are swimming in that, right? And the big fish are consuming the smaller fish and the littler fish, and they're bioaccumulating all this toxicity, right? So, there may be omega-3s in there, but it's in a package with a bunch of other stuff that you don't want. Okay, which also leads me to this bioaccumulation idea that in the environment there are all these static pollutants, like these pollutants that don't biodegrade, like dioxins, PCBs, that bioaccumulate in these animals. Like when you eat plants, yes, there's some of that, but these animals have been eating GMO corn, wheat, and soy their whole life, right? They're bioaccumulating all this toxicity, and that's passed on to you when you eat them. So just understand that. Then if we're processing the meat, we're getting in big trouble because we've got things like nitrites in there, which are recognized as a group 1 carcinogen, that the processed meat is directly related to cancer. And then other meat is a group 2 carcinogen, may cause cancer, okay? So a lot of reasons to stay away from dairy, meat, fish, and eggs. We didn't even get into eggs. We've got the saturated fat and cholesterol, which doesn't really contribute to autoimmune disease, but it's also a problem, right? Because the body produces its own cholesterol, right? So when you consume excess of that, it just globs up in your arteries, leading to heart disease, okay? But pertaining to autoimmune disease, I think this is everything we wanted to cover as far as animal products. So now, the third thing, and we've already kind of alluded to it, is refined, and we'll get into what refined means. It's a very important word. Refined. I really like my bubble letters. I hope you do too. Refined and processed foods. Okay. These are things that are not made in nature, right? They are made in a lab, that these processed food companies create them to taste good, right? And they create them to be addictive. And how do they do that? Well, number one with the processed foods is that a lot of these things they want a longer shelf life, so they include preservatives, okay? These are foods that make it so bacteria don't eat it, bugs don't eat it, pests don't eat it, right? Okay, so now if those things don't eat it, it's probably toxic, okay? There's an adage that one of my mentors, Dr. Doug Graham, says that if the food doesn't go bad, that's because it already is bad, okay? So we're adding preservatives, okay? These are things that when you read the ingredient label, you can't pronounce them, you don't know what they are. Well, guess what? Your body doesn't know what they are either. And if they're killing bugs and bacteria, they're probably killing you. They're probably toxic to you as well. So that is the downside of trying to preserve these foods chemically. Okay, these artificial chemicals are toxic to the body. The body has to do work to try to expunge them. It's adding to your overall toxic load. And the greater your toxic load is, the more impeded you are to be able to detoxify, and the sicker you're going to be. Right? It's when we lower the toxic load enough that the body can begin to clear the backlog of toxicity in the body, and that's when healing happens. So we'll get more into that in the next class here. So these processed foods also have dyes, right? These the body doesn't know what these are. These are, again, artificial synthetic chemicals. The body doesn't know how to process and recognizes them as toxic. They cause damage. Okay, so then of course we also have refined foods, okay, which aren't really foods at all, because refining is basically taking away parts of a food, right, to make it taste better, to give it a better shelf life, to give it a better color, to give it just be able to do more with it, okay. Make it more addictive, right? So what is refining? Refining is stripping away ingredients. The simplest idea is like you take brown rice and they refine it, they run it through a machine, and the bran gets taken off and it becomes white rice, okay? But deeper than that, you're stripping away nutrients. So the most common refined foods you're going to think of are refined sugars and refined oils, okay? How do we make a refined sugar like high fructose corn syrup? Well, we take corn and we essentially juice it. We strip away the fiber, right? And in that process, we're left with like this syrupy, sugary stuff, right? But what did we take away to get that? Well, we took away the fiber, we took away the protein, we took away the fat, we took away the vitamins, the minerals, the enzymes, the coenzymes, the phytonutrients, all the good stuff that would be in that corn, right? If it, of course, we're organic, right? And we're left with just the carbohydrate, the fructose, right, and a little bit of water, right? And guess what also came along with it? All the pesticides that were sprayed on all the Roundup, right? That also ended up in the corn syrup. But all the vitamins and nutrients and anything good in it got stripped away and thrown in the trash. Okay, maybe the fat was kept for corn oil, which is its own process. Okay, how do you make an oil? Well, you take olives, right? How do you make olive oil? You take olives, and in the ancient times you used to just grind them in a mortar and pestle, right? But now they've got an industrial press and they put a bunch of olives in there and they just smush them, right? And the oil shoots out, right? What's left behind? The husk. Okay, so now you've got the oil, which is just liquid fat with a little bit of vitamin E, and then in the husk you've got the fiber, the water, the protein, the carbohydrate, the vitamins, the minerals, the enzymes, the coenzymes, the phytonutrients, all gone and thrown in the trash. Okay? Olives, pretty much a healthy food. Olive oil, stripped of all its nutrition. Avocados, healthy food. Avocado oil, strip away all the nutrition from the avocados. Coconut, very healthy food. Eat the coconut, right? But you refine it into an oil, you strip away all the nutrition and throw it away. Now it's nutrition replete. It's what's called empty calories, right? Calorie rich, nutrient poor, right? It's got all these calories, right? Whether it's carbohydrates or fat, right? Whether it's sugar or it's oil, it's essentially calories with no nutrition, okay? And so what does this do to our brain? When we consume that, we get very calorically dense foods. Our brain gets a dopamine hit. It says, whoa, this is good stuff. There's a lot of calories in this. It must be good for you. Eat more of it, right? Like it causes a dopamine spike in the brain, and the body wants to eat more of it because it thinks it's getting more nutrition. But as we know, it isn't. The nutrition's been stripped away. So what does the brain do? It says, well, we didn't get the nutrition. Eat more, and eat more, and eat more. And then realize why the food becomes addictive, right? And Lay's potato chips says, bet you can't eat just one. Right? Well, of course, because the food is causing this massive dopamine hit. Your brain keeps eating more of it, thinking it's going to get the nutrition, but it never does. So you get in this endless cycle of eating and eating and eating, and not till you're full, but until you hate yourself, right? Whereas real food that's got nutrition in it, right? Like if you crave sugar and you eat your fair share of oranges, you're going to get full, and the brain's going to turn the sugar craving off because it got the nutrition, was what it really wanted from the oranges, okay? But if you're just eating candy, there's no nutrition in that, so the brain just keeps eating it, making you hungry. It's like, oh, I can't. I just stop. I'm just so hungry all the time. I have a sugar demon. No, what's going on is that you're consuming foods that are nutritionally replete, have no nutrition in them, right? And so your brain keeps trying to consume more, thinking it'll get nutrition, but it never does. That's why these foods are addictive. Okay, that's why these foods cause health problems, because you're basically getting no nutrition anymore. You're just getting a bunch of empty calories. And so when the standard American diet is essentially all of this, we get disease. Okay, so the safest bet to stop the chronic inflammation is to remove these foods from your diet. Okay, which I know scares a lot of y'all because it's like, that's basically all that I eat. Well, I'm going to show you in the next class what you can eat instead to create health, to reverse disease, okay? And you're going to have a better understanding of why all these things are so bad and what actually the antidote is, what you should be eating instead, all right? And that one thing that drove me nuts early on in my journey, where people would be like, don't eat this, don't eat this, don't eat this, you know, and then be like, well, what do I eat? Well, we're going to get into that. One other thing I want to add on the refined foods, right? Seed oils is a thing that's been it's been a lot of hype lately, right? It's like you got to stay away from seed oils, and I agree, but I also think it's all oils. Okay, all oils are refined foods, like I talked about. The seed oils are only problematic more so because they've got a lot of omega-6. Okay, like the soybean oil and the rapeseed oil and the canola oil and the corn oil, right? They've got a lot of omega-6 fatty acids, which are pro-inflammatory, and then they've got a lot of Roundup in them too. So not only are they a refined food with no nutrition in them, no vitamins, no minerals, no phytonutrients, none of that, no fiber, but now they've also got all these other things that are toxic and pro-inflammatory, like omega-6 fatty acids and Roundup. So seed oils are one of the worst things you can consume, but don't think that you're doing a much better thing by consuming avocado oil and coconut oil. It's still a refined food with no nutrition in it. Just eat the avocados and the coconuts. We'll get into that in the next class. Hope you learned a lot.